Hi there, and welcome to The Artist's Craft. I'm your host, Stacy Cochran, and we have an outstanding show for today. We've got a little bit of a hodgepodge today. The purpose of today's discussion is going to be to talk about some of the differences between producing, directing, and publishing. And we have an outstanding panel of guests with us here today in studio. To my far right, we have Billy Warden, who is a former executive producer with E! The Entertainment Network. To Billy's left, we have Behr, who is a co-publisher of the Raleigh Quarterly, which I have a copy of here. And then to Greg's left, to my right, we have Johannah Maynard, who is a co-director of the lab at Burning Coal. So I thought what we'd do is talk a little bit about some of your background and experience to start with. Why don't you start us off, Billy?
Sure. Thanks for having us here. This is going to be great, hodgepodge or not. So I started out as a journalist at the News and Observer right here in this very city. Went to Los Angeles and took those writing craft and turned it into being a television producer, and then created television shows for E! Work with the WB and Telepictures, and continue to do that today.
Excellent. And Greg, a little bit about your background.
I've been a lover of writing and reading for as long as I can remember. Went through NC State, their great creative writing program. More so, I also love writers, so I've always wanted to help people get their work out there and get published.
Love in what way?
All sorts of ways.
All right, I think that's
No,
enough.
I don't like to be limited
Sure.
in my love.
No, I understand.
We'll definitely cover that territory in a couple of minutes here. And to Greg's left, we have Johannah Maynard, who is a co-director of the lab at Burning Coal. And tell us a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, I studied directing, design, and this program called Creating Original Work at New York University. And I really love to take theater, the traditional aspects and non-traditional aspects, and shake it up and make new work. And I came from New York via Minneapolis back home to Raleigh to kind of make some new theater here.
Awesome. So we've got an excellent panel of guests, as you can tell, in studio today to talk about some of the differences between producing, directing, and publishing. Three things that I absolutely love personally. So Billy, talk a little bit about some of the distinctions that you see between those two roles.
Well, I can talk about being a producer, and that's essentially being a ringmaster, you know, in the circus. So the ringmaster doesn't have to juggle as well as everybody. He may do a little juggling, he may do a little bit of tight roping, but he doesn't have to be as good as the actual tightrope walker. But he does have to have the loudest voice. He has to be able to get up on the podium and tell everybody what to do and direct everybody's attention. And that's really what a producer does. He brings the circus together, puts the show on, and then lets other people's talents sort of carry the day.
Excellent. And Johannah, what would you say is sort of a director's role in theater? What kinds of things does a director do? Well,
a director, first of all, has to have an incredible amount of vision and passion and an ability to convey that and inspire the people that he or she's working with, so that they can convey that vision.
Yeah. Awesome. And Greg, as a publisher, is your role, would you say, more closely linked to being a producer or a director, or is it something?
No, I think it's a little bit of both, with another element as well. Where it takes an ability to recognize. You know, you can only publish so much. It's the same with production, the same with directing. There's only so much that can be out there. So it's about recognizing and believing in someone or a story so much so that you're going to really put all you can behind it to get that out there and get people really excited about it.
And spell check is more important for you.
Yes, that's probably true, because that's where all the pressure comes in, really,
yes.
in the end.
And the ultimate goal in publishing is obviously, you know, a print version of what you're doing. Like I say, I've got a copy of the Raleigh Quarterly here, or something online. You guys are doing both online and print versions of the Raleigh Quarterly. How is that working out for you?
Well, it's working out great. We have at www.raleighquarterly.com. Folks can come in, they can submit their work, and things will go up much quicker. You know, with the quarterly, we're only putting out one every 3 months. But online, we're constantly updating, finding that great new stuff that people are saying to us. We've got so many submissions from both local writers and across the country and around the world.
Short stories, poems, photography, art, and we run contests all the time. So we're wrapping up the Big Beard contest. You can check it out at raleighquarterly.com, but that's a short story, 600-word kid story that illustrators from around the country and around the world really sent in submissions to illustrate certain scenes. And then Greg's going to take the story and some of the illustrations up and see if we can get it published.
That's an awesome idea. Well, talk a little bit about some of the creative vision behind the Raleigh Quarterly. Was it initially your idea, or was it a joint venture? Or talk about how the idea, where did it begin, and what do you see as its purpose?
When I was in college, a few years ago, a lot of folks my age in the creative writing department had a really hard time getting published. You're not a name, so you're not going to get into the Parish Review. It's just, that's just the way things are. But
that's why they haven't written me. I submitted years ago.
Exactly. But so all of my school friends were sending things out there and just getting rejection letters after rejection letters. So there had to be something else for them. So in college we created something similar. It didn't have a print version, but it was exclusively a online magazine that only published the work of college students. We saw a huge response. Professors from across the country were getting their students involved in doing it, and so we decided that let's do it again, but this time expand it out farther, because there's so many people out there who are great writers, not just people who've gone through creative writing programs, but doctors and lawyers who are writing on the side and not thinking that what they're producing is any good. But it turns out, the best stuff we've received are by people who aren't necessarily quote-unquote writers.
Yeah, that's been the best thing about it, is letting people's light shine where they didn't have an opportunity to do that before.
What do you see as sort of the long-term goal of the Raleigh Quarterly? Is it going to stay primarily in a print and online version? Do you see this developing into more of a sort of multimedia capacity, or?
Yeah, multimedia for sure, and with maybe quarterlies around the country. So you have a Raleigh Quarterly, you have an Omaha Quarterly, you have a San Jose Quarterly, and you can find the very best on a sort of a master website.
Brilliant.
And best not by our standards, best by the rules of social networking and things like that now. So folks who are reading, you're creating an online workshop. So you go in, you read people's stories, you leave constructive criticism, you rate what you think of the story, and so then the best stuff, as we call it, organically starts to get to the top. And then that then becomes a place for publishing houses to come in and say, well, these we can show you exactly who are the best writers out there now.
Such a need for content out there that we see the quarterly in any of its forms, online or print or events. We do a lot of events, as being a conduit to cultivate content and then get it into that next phase, that mass distribution phase.
That's great. And you, Joanna, are doing not totally dissimilar type work in the lab
totally
at Burning
similar.
Coal. What is the purpose, would you say, of the lab at Burning Coal?
Well, to get local playwrights and artistic talent who's interested in being a part of a theater community, of developing a common vocabulary, a language in which we can work as a company and create plays from scratch in whatever form of development, and kind of question the medium of playwriting. What are all the ways to write a play? What are all the ways to develop a script? And make Raleigh and the Southeast more of a hub for that type of experimental work in theater.
What do you see as the difference between a producer in theater and directing? Because what I'm hearing you say is very similar to what a producer does, in my mind, and that is you kind of pool resources to get these playwrights together with directors. Do you see those roles as kind of similar?
The producer and the director in theater, I think that they're very dissimilar. I know for myself, times when I'm having to self-produce to put up my own show, it's like having to have two different heads, because the producer aspect is dealing with the money, making sure there's rehearsal spaces, making sure people can get to and from rehearsals, all of the business end of making something happen, whereas the director has to be a true artist. But I guess in my capacity with the lab, I am working more as a producer, trying to make things happen for other artists and help bring this group together.
Which do you feel more comfortable?
I feel way more comfortable being the artist, but I would like to be part of a community where there's lots and lots of artists to work with, and people who are have a mind for experimentation and to try new things, and not just let it be the status quo that it's got to be a big Broadway musical or it's not good theater. So
that's a really good point about the role, everyone's role in creating a real community. That at some point you've got to take on a role that is more functional and not, you know, the artistic white hot center of a production. And then you can move into that other role at other times. But I think that's the real test of a community, if people are willing to put on different hats to make it happen on a regular basis.
Yeah, totally.
Very interesting. I think one thing that was kind of going through my mind as I was listening to you, Joanna, is I wonder if there's some way to wed all of these elements, like what you've got going online with the Raleigh Quarterly, with multimedia, maybe video recording some of these actors, and I wonder if there's an audience for that with the kind of audience that you're beginning to develop with the Raleigh Quarterly.
Definitely. We propositioned her before we started today.
Well, I think you have to clarify what you mean by
that.
Well,
I would, if you let me continue with our Big Beard. So we're going to have a big event to celebrate Big Beard, and we want people to come down and act it out. We want to record it and put that up as well. So it's encompassing so many different elements of what creativity is in this area.
Big Beard is a kid story about Blackbeard's little brother. And so when we found out you were from Burning Coal, our first question was, you probably know some guys would be great pirates. You might have some costumes.
Absolutely.
We could put on a show.
I hope that there is a community for this here, because I think that that's the way to keep pushing artistic boundaries, is what is the best that each media has to offer and how to incorporate them together to make something that's better than each of the parts.
Well, one of the things I've been struck with since moving back home to Raleigh, I grew up here in Raleigh and moved back here just a couple of years ago, is just how rich the arts community is. And my sense of it is it's on the verge of really developing some interesting things. I think what Burning Coal is doing with the new Murphy School of Theater, you know, you guys are going to be housed there for years to come, and it's a brilliant facility. It's a great facility to have.
It's a beautiful facility, and I think Jerome Davis, the artistic director at Burning Coal, is doing such a wonderful job utilizing the community and the history of Raleigh and giving young artists like myself a chance to do real work on a professional level and involve the stories of the community. At the end of this season is a new play entitled 1960 about the civil rights movement in Raleigh. So I think that it is part of this move towards a more cultural, exciting Raleigh.
How would you compare a massive city like New York, you know, literally where it would take hours to walk from one end of downtown Manhattan to the other, to a hub like Raleigh, culturally, now that you've experienced both?
Well, I think that for me, and you know, I was talking to one of my best friends from college in New York last night, and she's now in Chicago, and we were talking about, you know, if someone said, all expenses paid, we'll move you back to New York City, we'll set you up in a place, are you gonna go? And it was not an easy yes for either one of us, because when you think about just the day-to-day living as an artist, as a person who's trying to create, it's harder in New York. Just the fact that there's such a easier cost of living, there's nice weather in Raleigh, it's easier to get around, there's not such huge snowstorms and things like that.
Well, it only takes a little bit of snow to shut things down.
But it makes it easier to do it.
Of snow.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Schools will close. Hey, there might be snow on Friday. Well, we're just going to close everything on Friday. But no, you're absolutely right. You know, I think that there's something to be said for being able to actually feel like you have a voice in a community, which I think you get that in Raleigh, in a way that maybe you don't in a Los Angeles unless you're really, really good, or a New York.
Really, really good or really, really wealthy. You know, and that's part of some of the issues I was having. I was getting jealous of my peers who had trust funds and had like parents who were like, oh, don't worry about a job. We'll pay your rent. We'll pay your bills. What do you need? Go out there, intern for nothing. It's easier to do things like that here, to take those chances.
One of the most exciting things about the Quarterly was early on when we did our first edition online, and we were hanging out at the Raleigh Times, and Mayor Meeker came over and started talking about the Quarterly and what his favorite stories were on the site, which would not happen in New York or Los Angeles. I
think you see with the creative community here in Raleigh, you know, there's this real feeling that everybody's willing to pull their own weight and then some to get us to that level where we are. You know, we're a creative community now, but it gets to the level where we're on par with some of the biggest creative communities. So, you know, people are willing to help each other out and do what they need to do to ensure that we're getting ourselves out there with that brand.
What you're doing, Stacy, is a great example of that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing this, and you've got things going at Forward Books and other kinds of places. So.
Well, I appreciate that. And the thing is, you know, what we're doing here today in studio at the Raleigh Television Network, this would be extremely difficult for somebody to do in New York City. Mm-hmm. I'm sure the public access television in a big city like New York and Los Angeles is extremely competitive.
If you were to do the show in bikinis with you know, co-eds, I think we could probably get that on E!
Which, you know, I'm open to things. I'm open to things, you know. We have bikinis behind us and juggling.
This sounds like a pitch. That wouldn't work out.
But why Raleigh? Why Raleigh Quarterly? I mean, you started out as a reporter here, so
right.
was it kind of moving back home for you? Was that why?
Well, I'm a big fan of the local. That, you know, that things really interesting can happen local, and not trying to be generic and appeal to everybody. So Greg pitched the title of the Raleigh Quarterly, and it instantly brought to mind the idea of trying to build a community and seeing if we could do that, sort of beta test the concept here, and then moving it out to other cities that would have a local flavor on it, but all be pursuing that same thing. Great work from likely sources and unlikely sources.
Now talk a little bit about your work with, is it Capital Strategies? No?
No. Well, we have been in the, we're both in the marketing business, and so we have some experience looking for targets to appeal to and asking folks to take some kind of action.
Do you guys have an LLC for that or anything?
Well, we're set up with the Raleigh Quarterly, and then so a lot of projects run through that.
Interesting.
With the sense of the community too, and getting Raleigh on the map as well is really important. You know, so we want this thing to be exported as well to other places to show, you know, Raleigh is a huge hub of great writing, great art, people who are excited to do things, and we like to show this as an example of people to say you can come to Raleigh, you can get something like this done. If you go to New York, it'd probably be a little bit more difficult to get, you know, a great website up, you know, get a print publication out there, you know, with people who are willing to take a little risk onto themselves to support you to do it.
Or you'd be one of hundreds.
Yeah.
And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Burning Coal's doing the same thing. I mean, we just did the American premiere of David Edgar's The Prisoner's Dilemma, and I mean, that is the American premiere. It's not in New York, it's not in LA, it's not in Chicago, it's here in Raleigh.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
And one of the trends that I've seen, at least with a couple of plays, is that they start in smaller cities, and then if there's this huge word of mouth or buzz about it, then it potentially develops to go to New York. There was a play that just came out of the Steppenwolf Theater, I think that won the Pulitzer Prize this past year. That was there was so much buzz about this play that it ended up being produced in New York.
So August Osage County.
Yeah. Which it's a heck of a play. If you haven't had the opportunity to read it, August Osage County is just wow. I mean, it's funny, it's heavy, it's family, it's America, you know, populism at its truest sense.
Right.
And it started at the Steppenwolf Theater, you know, which is not a small theater in and of itself, but I see the kinds of things that you guys are doing at Burning Coal as similar to that. It's, you know, it's a community theater. It's, you know, you've got your finger on the pulse of the community, and you're developing plays from within the community to try and produce through the lab.
And trying to also bring the best plays that are out there to be produced here, but at the same time, the best plays that are here to try to get them produced as well. So
yeah, and those things can become mass audience products. You know, if you think about two very disparate figures, Alfred Hitchcock and Mark Twain. You know, Hitchcock, starting out, if you watch his films from the 30s, had a very distinct English style. It was very droll. The pacing was a little different than what Hollywood was doing. But you could spot that talent, and you could make him a mass market product that would go on to change the entire industry and become maybe the industry's greatest brand. And you know, Twain too entranced the country with a very local kind of approach and worldview that ultimately became the stuff of bestsellers for decades and decades and decades. So any community can produce great, lasting work, but I think it takes that that community being the key word, people willing to work together to get the work out there, because it's hard to do it by yourself.
And a hub. You've got to have a forum, and with the Raleigh Quarterly and with Burning Coal, these are two hubs that folks who are watching us here in Wake County can really tap into. I mean, it sounds like one of the goals with the Raleigh Quarterly is not to showcase the biggest names in the literary world, but it's to find those voices that haven't been heard and haven't been showcased yet, and to give them a place, which is very similar to the goal with the lab at Burning Coal.
Absolutely. We want the people who are willing to experiment and try new things. I mean, as a director, some of the greatest actors I've worked with are some of the ones that by my peers were discarded. Oh, she's not very good. Well, you're just not using her correctly if you don't think she's very good. Because there's lots of ways to tap into your talent, and we want all of those people who are interested in trying to be part of the lab.
I think that speaks to your wisdom as a maturing director, to be able to look into something that somebody else might see and say, well, I don't see the value in that, and say, hey, wait a minute, we're not using this the right way. There's something here.
Yeah, find what people do well and help them do it even better.
One of the stories on the Raleigh Quarterly website now and in the publication is called Crazy Man, and it's written by someone who had an experience at Dorothea Dix as a patient, and then wrote about that. And so what we loved about that was that it's very pertinent issue to this community, right, just to Raleigh. What's going to happen with Dorothea Dix and Dorothea Dix's heritage? But the story stands on its own. You could read that story in Chicago or Mexico City or wherever and get something out of the story. So we love that double play of the local and the global.
It's fascinating. Now, do the stories in the Raleigh Quarterly, do they have to have some sort of connection, as I'm seeing here with Michael Fisher's story? Do they have to have a connection to the local community, or can it?
Oh, no. No, not at all. We just we want to highlight just the best of what, if you went over to Ireland and you had the best story came out of that, that's great. We just want to focus on whatever's the best out there.
Well, that's really exciting. I think we've got some excellent things that we're talking about here. It's absolutely fascinating to me, these connections between what a producer does, what a publisher does, and then what a director does as well. And I think in this day and age, these multiple kinds of venues or roles really are beginning to come together. We had talked a little bit, Billy, at Quail Ridge Books about the future of television and whether it would be the same as it is now 10 years or 20 years from now. And one of the things that I'm fascinated by is sort of the integration of the internet with that. And when I see what the Raleigh Quarterly is doing, and a lot of literary magazines like that are doing, using an online resource to reach an audience beyond their local community even, and what Burning Coal is doing with their website, I think it's where we are now, is kind of bringing all of these multiple type of media together into one location. And it'll be neat to see how all this sort of develops for the Raleigh Quarterly in the coming year or two.
I mean, an integrated website where people can come on and if you have a sense of community, online is just par for the course. Now it's coming up with those next steps that are really going to pull people in and make them feel like they just want to keep returning and coming back day after day. Is what becomes difficult, and what we're working very hard to figure out a way that we can get people continually coming back and checking out the Quarterly. And
then coming up with a business model for that. So
we're gonna figure out how to make money off the internet. We're gonna be the
We're working hard on that. But you need that. You need some revenue. You need a business model to keep it going. I mean, business sustains art, and then art in turn sustains society. So we're trying to get that flow going.
Well, I wonder if advertising is not the way to go. I know we had chatted a little bit about this at Quail Ridge Books a couple of weeks ago, but the advertising model is becoming much more in flow, if you will, or in sync with third-party web designers. So if you've got a website and you've got 20,000 eyeballs hitting that website every month, there's a way to really tap into advertising to make a little bit of money for you. Are you guys selling subscriptions? I don't know how
we're selling these. We're selling these individually now. Subscriptions should be coming very soon. And then go back to the advertising. You know, what we're trying to do. We're working to encompass or to incorporate advertising into Raleigh Quarterly. But you know, when you're dealing with people's creativity, you just have to be very careful that you're not putting up a banner ad for you know, deodorant right next to their, you know, something that they poured, you know, parts
they sweated
of
over.
They sweated it,
To
to get going. And then, yeah, very good.
Yes.
And then,
Well, what is the business model? You guys, you mentioned a little bit that it's obviously something that's on the table. Is talking about the business model. Is it going to be a subscription based? Is it advertising based? Is there something else?
Well, we're looking at advertising online in the discreet and appropriate way.
Yeah.
Looking at selling subscriptions to the publication, and then we're also really interested in branded entertainment products. So you know, if Big Beard can become a kid's book, and it was developed out of this community, and someone will publish it and people will buy it, and that kicks revenue to what we're doing, and we can kick back revenue to the artists. So I think we're real interested in those products that go out to a mass audience that kick back revenue.
Fascinating.
Smart.
In theory, we'll see.
yeah, we'll see. Yeah, may not work at all.
Well, I mean, it's tough, and it's you know, in all fairness, it is a very crowded market. Literary magazines they're very competitive. A lot of them have funding from universities, and it sounds like you guys are trying to do that outside of the, you know, traditional university funded way. It'll be interesting to see how it develops, and how that diversity of kind of privatizing a literary magazine shapes it.
And we try to take a little bit more modern angle to the literary magazine than most typically do. You know, there's a bunch of different types of, you know, online literary publications like Smith Magazine that have that constant flow of information going. And then there's your traditional online or print publication like your Parish Reviews and Virginia Quarterlies that don't have as much online. We're trying to create some form of a hybrid where it, you know, we're retaining the old, because it's classic and we love to have print, but then we also really want to get online and get people excited there as well.
That's exciting. Now, what at Burning Coal do you guys have coming up? We're down to just under a minute here. What do you guys have coming up in November that folks who are watching us can check out?
Well, definitely check out the website for the main stage season, but within the lab, we hope at some point in November to be able to put up another of what we call the Play Naked series, where we take scripts that are being developed in the lab and give it a kind of naked performance where we strip it down to the basic technical elements and give it a short rehearsal period with great actors and a great director, and invite an audience and see what we're working with and see where to go from there with the script development.
We should work together on that.
Yes.
We should figure something out.
Should.
We have to go. We have to go.
We'll have to talk. We'll have to talk about that just a little bit here in a minute. We are just about out of time. The website is burningcoal.org, right? And RaleighQuarterly.com. If you guys at home are watching this and want to check out the Raleigh Quarterly or Burning Coal, those are the URLs for those. For all of us here at Raleigh Television Network Channel 10, and specifically for the crew working hard and diligently back there today, a little undermanned for the artist craft, we want to thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you.
We clap.
Yes. Thank you. Awesome. Very good.
We're interested in, his name's Richard, his last name